Hey, just a heads up that the following content may be disturbing or triggering for some listeners and is not appropriate for children. Please take care of yourself and others who may be listening with you. Welcome to the Bonus Babies Podcast, a show that has no easy answers, only hard questions.
So before I turned 18, I had tried to find my brother because we hadn't talked since I was 16 because he moved to California and I lost track of him and we lost track of each other. And I knew my mom's first husband, my first dad, worked for the Coast Guard. And I knew they lived in Orange County. That's the last thing I knew. So I called the Orange County Coast Guard. And I don't remember exactly who I talked to, but I said, listen, my dad's name was X, Y, and Z. He was a lieutenant commander. I'm trying to find him. And somebody recognized his name. They patched me through to one of his administrative assistants that worked directly for him. And she said, give me your phone number. I'm going to call him. I'm going to give it to him. And she did. And they called me. And they picked up a kid and turned me into a functional adult. They cleaned up my parents' mess.
Can you tell me what you call the kids who you've cared for over the years?
We feel that the children that we receive coming into our home are bonuses. So we call them bonus babies.
I love that. This is your host, Jayne Amelia Larson, and I'm a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate volunteer for youth in foster care. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful. In the same way a CASA works, I explore all things in the foster care maze by talking to kids, parents, caregivers, attorneys, social workers, therapists, really anybody and everybody who will speak to me to keep the conversation open and the information flowing about all things CASA.
Hi, this is Jake Eberly, the producer of the Bonus Babies podcast, and this week, Jayne speaks with Maria Harding. She was adopted at birth and then put into foster care by her adoptive mother when she was 11. Foster care was very rough on her, and she describes her early life as going from one hell to another. And when you hear the story, you'll see why. Here's Maria.
Hi, I'm here with Maria Harding. Hello, Maria.
Hey.
Hey. Hey, thanks for doing this because your story is super interesting and I'm going to let you tell it. So I'm just going to jump right in.
All right.
Where are you from? How were you raised?
I was born in Vermont. We lived in New York at the time. I was adopted at 3 days old by my parents. And my dad at the time lived in the Coast Guard, and we moved around. So we kind of went up and down both coastlines and landed in the Portland, Beaverton area of Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of went to school and grew up there through high school.
Right. And do you know why you were adopted? What was the situation?
I don't. I really don't. I believe the story was it was a professor-student liaison that became me. But whether that's true or not, I don't know.
What was your home life like with your adoptive parents?
It wasn't good. I was born with a mild deformity, so I was a very crying baby. It just wasn't very good. My mother really never liked me, was perception that I had as a child and growing up. And she made sure I knew that I was not the favorite in the family.
Wow. You're like, even as a little girl, you felt that.
Yeah. I mean, she made it was very unpleasant. It borderline pretty abusive. It physical and emotional for sure. So yeah, it was not fun. There's a lot of things I don't remember, but a lot of things I do remember were the worst.
Right. So did you know that was different than what was happening with most kids, or different from? Did you think, what's wrong here? Why am I not getting the love that I need?
I didn't know for a very long time. I didn't know. I just thought I thought there was something very wrong with me. I thought it was my fault. It was something that, I didn't matter how hard I tried. I couldn't do anything right. So it just became something that I just thought, well, I guess this is how it is.
Right. And I remember you said it was even like you didn't load the dishwasher correctly.
That was one of my worst crimes, yes.
Wow, that doesn't seem that criminal to me. I mean,
it is not.
Like I still don't load a dishwasher well. My boyfriend does it. I put stuff in the dishwasher and then he reloads it. I mean, maybe it's a special skill. I don't
Yeah,
think so, but I'm just not that good at it, and it's not that big a deal.
exactly. It is not that big of a deal. It is not that big of a deal. I mean, it was, I was born dyslexic. I learned very differently. It was hard. Spelling, even to this day, is not my forte. In an interview once, I had somebody ask me, what do you do not well? I said spelling. I said, I am not the person for spell check. If you need something proofread, do not come to me. I'm not going to be good
Mhm.
at it. Period.
So, how was your adoptive dad in all this? Was he sweet to you? Did he protect you? Was he distant? What?
He did his best. We have an odd family dynamic. My mother was married multiple times. She divorced our father, I think before I was in kindergarten, 4 or 5. And then she married a couple other times. So then it became a that was thrown into the mix of, who are you going to live with? You go visit this parent, you stay with this parent. He did the best he could. He openly is in recovery now, but he was an alcoholic. I don't ever remember him being unkind to my brother or me. I know when we'd go visit him, the stories of I was in trouble and he was supposed to instill my grounding when we were visiting him. And he's like, well, she didn't do that here. I'm not going to do that. I mean, he did his best with what he had. And then my mother remarried a couple other times. And then when I was 11, her third husband adopted my brother and I. So our father changed. And he did the best he could too. He wasn't an alcoholic, but it's dealing with my mother is difficult to survive. And he did his best, and he was also just trying to survive. And we've had that conversation many times as adult now.
Mhm. And then what happened when you were a teenager? Because you're
Well, the story goes back a little further than that. The first time I was thrown out of the house, I was 5.
5 years old.
Yeah.
Your mom threw you out at 5 years old?
Yep. I was shipped down to California to live with my dad because I was a horrible child and she just couldn't handle it anymore. And so that started the ping pong. Whenever she was fed up, I would be shipped off to California to live with my father. And that was the threat at the house too. If you don't ship up or you don't behave, I'm going to send you to go live with your father. So that became a weapon. But anyway, so the first time was 5. Then after he gave us up for adoption, that no longer was an option. So shortly after I was adopted, I was 11 and I was termed an unmanageable child by my mother and sent to foster care in the Oregon area.
Wow. Did you know what that meant or what it was or
No idea.
right. So what was it like? What were your memories of that?
Um, I honestly couldn't tell you the day it happened. I know I was probably terrified, but I know it was all of a sudden, next thing I know, I was living in foster care in Hillsboro, Oregon, and a house full of 16, 15 other kids, various ages, mostly teenagers.
And you were 11.
And I was 11.
Wow. Did you have any contact with your brother at that time?
He was still at home. Yeah. I don't remember ever talking about it with him at that age. He was in boarding school at the time. The joke is I got foster care. He got boarding school.
Oh, wow. That, as you said, you got the short end of the stick, right?
Yeah. Again, I was not the favorite and he was miserable. As we talked as adults, he's like, I never wanted to go to boarding school. He goes, I hated it. I'm like, don't blame me. I would have too. So no, I don't think we ever talked about it. Not when we were kids. And then when I think I was 16, he had fallen out of good graces and was being threatened to put into foster care by our mother. And he called our first dad and bowed out. He's like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Right. Okay. So what happened to you in foster care? Did you bounce around? You end up at home to home to home, group home?
It was weird. So I had a couple of different foster homes, but for the most part, I stayed in this one main one for a very long time, and it was weird because my mother's very cyclical, and I learned how to time it, and it was like, wow, all right, it sounds about right. I'd be gone. I'd be in foster care. I was a horrible child, and then we'd start having visitation and seeing each other, and then I'd be brought back home after 7 months ish. 7 to 10 months. And then the first month was great. The second month, the wheels started coming off the bus. And by the third month, I was back out the door. and back in foster care.
Wow. So that happened over and over again with her.
Over and over again.
I wonder.
And it was the state foster care first for a while. And then she decided she could manage it better than the state did. So she called the place where I was at and put me in private care in that same foster home. And they sent a check directly to that foster parent.
Right. So your parents were paying for you to be in foster care.
Yeah.
Not the state at that point.
On and off. Yeah. And then eventually the state caught on.
Uh-huh. Did you ever end up in a happy home where you felt like you were wanted?
At the very end, my senior year of high school, I ended up in a really good foster home. And I was 18 or no, I was 17 going on, 30. And I thought I knew better.
Of course.
We all did, I think. And I had saved up over the summer and bought my own car. And by that time, my mother wasn't allowed to have my phone number. My mother wasn't allowed to know my address. And I had purchased the car and I had the title put in my name, and the state found out I owned a car and said, well, you can't have a car. And I was like, well, but I do. It's in my name. And somehow I skirted the law. Somehow they put the title in my name too. And they weren't supposed to. And because you're legally not old enough to own a car in the state of Oregon, I guess. Whatever happened. Anyway, long story short, I finally got fed up of walking to the bus stop and walking past my car every morning. And I got my car and drove to school and went to school. And the foster mother, rightfully so, said that's not an option. And you clearly don't want to live by these rules in this house, so you have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Which was fair because I blatantly broke the rules knowingly. Anyway, I ended up in a really bad foster home again. And then
when you say bad, like what? Are you willing to talk about it?
It was another foster home where there was about 5 to 7 of us, I think. The people, it was just bad. I mean, long story short, I ended up getting my nose broke by one of the kids there when nobody was home. We'd gotten into a verbal argument, and the woman was very, very big, much bigger than me. And her way of solving the argument was punching me and breaking my nose. And so I left and went to a friend's house that nobody knew I knew, and hid there till the next morning when I called my social worker and said, I'm sure you've heard, this is where I'm at, and I will not return back to that house. No, I take that back. I called the foster mom that I wasn't the social worker. I called the foster mom because I didn't know what to do. That I had left the good home. I called her.
Yeah.
And I said, this happened and I don't know what to do. And she said, just stay there. We'll take care of it. And she got everybody involved with the state, and she came and picked me up, and they took me to the doctor, got my nose fixed. And she contacted a friend of hers and said, hey, she's a good kid. She needs a place that's safe. And I stayed with this lady who was taking care of a lady that had Alzheimer's, had a foster son that is still living with her in his 20s that had cerebral palsy. And so she got certified to be foster care, and I stayed there until I aged out. And those were the best 2 homes I ever lived in.
So you age out, and what did you do?
I knew I was getting ready to age out because I turned 18. So in Oregon, you age out at 18 or when you graduate. I turned 18 first. And I knew I was getting ready to age out, and I didn't know what I was going to do, where I was going to go. There was no programs that were offered to help me through the state. They were just, once you aged out, you're out. You were done.
Yeah, that's it. Like, right. They give you a duffel bag.
Yeah.
Right. With some toiletries and your paperwork. Like, good luck. Right.
So before I turned 18, I had tried to find my brother because we hadn't talked since I was 16 because he moved to California and I lost track of him and we lost track of each other. And I knew my mom's first husband, my first dad, worked for the Coast Guard. And I knew they lived in Orange County. That's the last thing I knew. So I called the Orange County Coast Guard. And I don't remember exactly who I talked to, but I said, listen, my dad's name was X, Y, and Z. He was a lieutenant commander. I'm trying to find him. And somebody recognized his name. They patched me through to one of his administrative assistants that worked directly for him. And she said, give me your phone number. I'm going to call him. I'm going to give it to him. And she did. And they called me. And spring break was coming. And they said, come visit. We'd love to have you. We've never stopped loving you. We've never stopped thinking about you. Why don't you come visit and hang out for spring break? And I said, okay. And I said, where am I going? And they're like, well, send you home again. They had moved to Tucson. So they were living in Tucson at the time. And since he had retired, they knew where he was after he retired, where he moved to. So I did that and spent a week with them, and we reconnected, and they told me I always had a home. And when I graduated, if I wanted to, they would take me in and help me, give me the same opportunities that they gave John. You know, they'd pay for my college. I had to get a B or better. If I didn't, I had to pay him back. And they picked up a kid and turned me into a functional adult. They cleaned up my parents' mess is what they did.
Yeah, you said they basically put you back together, right?
Yeah, they did. I mean, I was a wreck. I was a mess. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was supposed to be. I didn't know how to function. I had no self-esteem. I still thought I was, you know, a horrible person. And I hadn't processed any of my childhood. I hadn't faced all those demons that it created, and they put up with a lot of crap, and even had to do some tough love and put me back together and saved me a couple more times. You know, I got really good at making a mess of my life very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So they really did, and that's something that my legal dad and I have talked about as adults is that, you know, they cleaned up your guys' mess. They put two kids back together and made them adults that are actually good people, and the kids know it now. So yeah, they all now talk, which thought that would never happen, but he finally understood, and he knew. He's like, you're right, we did make a mess. He's apologized, and I told him he doesn't have to. It was a survival, and he was surviving, and we were trying to survive.
Right. And do you have any contact with your mom?
Not a one.
And you've no desire to?
No, I haven't. I think the last time I talked to her was in my early 20s, mid 20s, maybe. She's just not a very nice person. And she's just not, you know, she's legally my mother, but that's all. But she's isn't anything that I want in my life or want to be around. And I just have no space for her in my life.
Have you ever wondered why somebody like she would adopt a child and then reject that child?
I don't. It makes no sense. I think she's got some of her own mental issues, just because nobody behaves the way she does and is sane, in my opinion. I mean, I think she's crazy in some form. She's got some more, and I mean, I'm very generic and probably not a nice thing to say, but she's got something, whatever it is, but something's just not right.
And yet she kept on finding these guys and marrying them that somehow saw past that.
Yeah. Very dynamic. Very, I mean, she could walk into the room and capture everybody's attention. She has a very big presence. She just has always been able to, you know, walk into a room and literally command the room. The one thing she did teach me how to cook. She was an amazing cook. And so that was the one thing she gave me that I was like, yeah, okay. She gave me one thing I can say that's good, but she masks it very well. I mean, the state of Oregon didn't realize how bad it really was until I was 16, almost 17. And they really thought that it was the kids and not the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And then she left physical marks that she couldn't deny anymore, that they saw, and they're like, it's not the children.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So.
Have you thought about having your own family? Are you married? Do you have kids? What's your life like?
No, I have a partner. She's upstairs. I have 2 dogs and a couple of cats. I had a hysterectomy when I was 30, so that ship sailed for me a long time ago.
I see.
But no, I'm good with dogs.
Yeah. Well, they can be really good kids, actually, dogs and cats, right?
They are. They're my babies, and that's my family.
Right. And in terms of your partner, was there a struggle for you for your sexual identity when you were an adolescent, trying to figure that out? Was that part of the problem too?
I don't think so. I didn't realize I was gay until I was like 19 or 20. I mean, my mom had friends of the family that were friends of hers that were gay, and we were raised knowing that that's a thing and there's nothing wrong with it. But I literally somebody had to tell me I was. And I went, oh, that makes so much sense.
Like what? Someone said, you know that you're gay. You know that, right?
Right. Well, because we were talking about stuff, I think it was 18 or 19 or something like that. And yeah, I had never had really very many boyfriends. I had no interest in them. And it just was never a thing. And I just couldn't figure out. And somebody said, well, you ever thought maybe you're gay? And I was like, huh. Oh, well, there you go. That explains so much. So, that's kind of how it happened. And I was out of the house at that time. So, I mean, it wasn't the thing. In my later years, I found out through my brother that the reason why her and I don't have communication is because I'm gay. And my brother and I are like, well, that's rich.
Oh, so she disapproves of your.
That's the excuse she uses.
I see.
That's the excuse she uses. The main reason why she refuses to talk to me, and I knew when I did this, that would sever the ties for the rest of my life, is when her and my father were divorcing. I had to go to court and try to save him from going to jail, because there was a bunch of personal property that she had given me when we were talking that she was now in the court papers filing against, saying he stole all of this stuff, and he was about to go to jail. And he happened to come visit to say goodbye, and he was telling me the story of everything that was going on, and I was literally in my kitchen because he thought he was going to jail, and he's telling me about all the things that he's being accused of stealing and why he's saying goodbye. He goes, because I can't prove I didn't, and he literally really thought he was going to jail. And I said, okay. So, well, that's funny. I said, by the way, I said, here's a padlock. I said, there's a shed in the back of my house. I said, you might want to go look. I said, it has power, but you need to go look in the shed. And every piece of furniture and the china, everything, the family heirlooms were in my shed.
And she was accusing him of stealing it, knowing that she'd given it to you. Mm-hmm. So she just likes to punish people all around.
Yeah. Yeah. So I ended up going to court. He flew me to Oregon. We kind of hid me until the day I testified. And then they literally said they had somebody to add to the list to come testify. And they brought me in. And from that moment on, I knew that relationship was 100% severed, right, which I was not upset about.
No, well, and also you were telling the truth. You were doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why would you even have defended your mom in any way at that point?
Well, there was, and I was coming to understand that, there's this perception that, you have to love your mother. You have to love your father. You have to, there's that feeling of, well, that's what you're supposed to do. How you can't go against them. I mean, you just don't do that. They're your parents. And so, I had to figure that out, that, right or wrong, it doesn't matter. And that was the one thing that I did get out of growing up, is that, right or wrong, you stand up for what's right. And, even though she's my mother by paper, doesn't mean I have to love her. It doesn't mean I have to like her. I had to learn that that's not something that you have to do. It's earned.
Yeah, it sounds like you've done a lot of work on yourself. Have you had a lot of therapy, or have you processed a lot? Yeah,
I have. And that was part of, the evolution after Marty and Darlene. My parents that I went to stay with, I call them my parents, that I went to stay with in Arizona, is they literally helped put me back together. And through going through everything that I did, I learned I had to have therapy. I had to figure out how to deal with my ghosts. I had to figure out a way to look in the mirror and like who I saw looking back at me, because I didn't. Mm-hmm. I really didn't. Mm-hmm. So it was an evolution, and it's something that when my dad and I talk, when we got back in contact with each other, and all of that happened, and when I had to explain to them about Marty and Darlene, and also told them I'm not going to hide them. They're part of my life, and you can either like it or lump it, but they're not leaving my life. It was something that I told him. I said, because he apologized, and I said, you don't have anything to apologize for. My mantra, my full being to my core, is the person I am today is because of what I lived through. And I honestly know that the person that I like is me. And I don't know if I would be who I am without walking the road that I did. And it's not something that he should feel bad about. It's just something that happened, and we're past it, and it's time to move on.
And you don't sound bitter about it.
I'm not. I didn't know anything else. So I didn't know, it was the life I led, and you can either accept it or not. But bitter seems like a very heavy thing to have to carry around with you. And I don't, yeah. I got other things I'd want to do than that.
Have you tried to find your bio parents?
No. It's something I've thought about on and off, and my brother and I have talked about it on and off.
Right, and you're not from the same families, right? He was adopted, but you're from different families, and you know that.
Yeah, we're not related in any way, bloodline wise. But we've thought about it. I've never followed through with it. I've done the ancestry thing, but never anything more than that.
And why not? Are you not curious enough, or you just don't want to find out something you're not going to like, or?
No, I think it's a very personal decision to do that, and I don't want to. People's lives may have gone on without and become something different, and I don't want to be the person that knocks on somebody's door that is that skeleton in a closet they haven't shared and cause pain. So there's there's that, and there's part of it I'm lazy.
But how about what about if they're looking for you?
That could be a possibility. So I mean, because that's my brother said that too. He's like, they might be looking for you. I'm like, well, I'm not that hard to find.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, but I mean, it depending on whether it was a closed adoption, I'm assuming that that's what it was. So
it was.
yeah, you'd have to do either one of you would have to do a certain amount of digging.
Yeah, I would have to. For me, I would have to send an affidavit. I was born in Vermont, and I looked into what I have to do, and that's where the lazy part comes in. I have to do some form of an affidavit and file it with the court. It's something on something else, and I was just like, oh, that seems like a lot of work. So I mean, I may still do it someday. It's not something I'm not against. Again, I just don't. I could open it up, and if they're looking, they can find me. But I just don't want to show up and be that, like I said, that skeleton.
How did you find your partner?
Match.com.
Yay! Love to hear that. You got a good online dating situation.
Yeah, it was funny. I actually was going online to delete my account. And she had sent me a message, and one of my frustrations with all of it at the time was I got a lot of one-word messages or something. It was like, "Hey," or "What's up?" And I'd be just like, "That's what you open with? Please give me a complete sentence, somebody."
Tell me something, right?
Right. And she'd actually wrote a really nice note, and I had a cute picture of my dog at the time. Red Nose Day.
Mm-hmm,
I
yeah.
had got a red nose and popped it on his face and shot a picture of him. And that was with him and me both wearing red noses. And that was one of my profile pictures that I put online. And she thought it was great and wanted to know how I got my dog and what was my dog's name. How'd you get your dog to do that? And I don't have any dog. I used to have dog. And a whole paragraph. So I was like, well, I got to respond. And that became, this now. So it worked out.
And as you look back on how you were raised and how you had a pretty difficult adolescence and childhood, it sounds like, really, you seem very, that's the way it was, and that's just, that's what I got through it and put it behind me, whatever. Is that how it is for you all the time, or do you wake up at night thinking, oh God, that
for the most part, that's where I'm at most of the time. I will every now and then have a weird nightmare dream that just, about something. It's either my mother or something in my childhood. I was like, oh, that's odd. And it might, cause a little bit of stress. But again, I really did work hard to put that part of my life in a good place. And it doesn't really bother me for the most part. It is what it is. It's something that, again, I can't change, but I'm not gonna, I'm also not gonna carry that anvil around my neck and have it weigh me down. I refuse to let that part of my life be the part of this part of my life.
Right. And you agreed to this interview because I get the impression that this is an important story to tell for people who might even be going through something like what you've gone through, right?
Right. I think it's important because I didn't have anybody advocating for me as a kid. And I think a lot could have been averted, or a lot of different things could have not have happened if I had that. So it's also foster care is there's so much about it that's better, but there's so much about it that was wrong when I was in it. And I think people need to understand and fix it. And by telling my story, if that helps, then that's what I want to do. Also, when I aged out, there was a huge fear, and there needs to be something in place to help those teens and those people become adults and know how to navigate the next step of their life, because they've had so little control over their life up until the point when you age out. Nobody taught me what my next steps were. I knew I was supposed to go to college. Well, I didn't know how to do that. When I was in high school and in middle school, I was shunned. I was that foster kid. So I had to be a problem child. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was just, and that's why I was happy when John texted me and said, hey, would you want to do this? I was like, absolutely. To get it out there and to make sure that, what happened to me doesn't happen to somebody else, hopefully. And it changes the system and changes, how people think and how things are done. If it helps, great.
Well, that's exactly why I'm doing this podcast, because I think the average person has no idea about how kids end up in care, why they're in care, what happens to them in care.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's this idea that a kid goes into care, they go into a foster home, which is usually pretty good, and then they get adopted, and then it's over.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't realize it's the placements,
Mm-hmm.
or in your case, going home and back into care, home back into care, home back into care, and you having no control over anything,
Yeah.
and no advocate, which is, of course, the reason why I believe that the whole CASA, the whole program is so important,
Right.
and there are not enough of us.
Right.
Have you thought about being a CASA ever?
It's funny. We were reading the Sunday paper last week, the weekend before last. No, last weekend, and there was an actual article in the paper about CASA. And it was you and I had talked earlier in the week, and then that Sunday, it was like my partner literally went, here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I've actually convinced my company here in Atlanta to get involved in foster care.
Yeah, you said that. That's
We're
so cool. Yeah.
So we're looking at doing things from the corporate side and partnering with some different affiliations. We've got there's a small little group of us that have been put on like the council, and we've identified of a couple things, and so we're reaching out and looking into it. I think that my partner and I will probably be looking into doing some things, yeah, because it's something that I think would be good to do, and I would like. And I know looking back at 16, at 17, I didn't know who I wanted to be or who I could be growing up, and I thought I wasn't going to be. Nobody was going to take me serious because I was a foster kid, and
All that stigma. All the stigma that's
yeah,
attached to it. Yeah.
yeah, and if
Yeah.
and if you get somebody who can help show the kids that, hey, I was a foster kid and look what I did. I've worked really hard to get where I am today, and I consider myself very successful. So if I can show them that and give them hope, sometimes that's all you need, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really true. And I think also if you do it with your partner, you can actually get a sibling set and keep kids together, and you kind of partner the work, which is great because um, it doesn't mean that you have to do it together. You can have different kids, but you can also do a sibling set, or
No.
and that might mean not just 2 kids, but 3 or 4 kids, who sometimes end up
Yeah.
in care, and they get separated. And if they have CASAs can really pave the way to keeping them together, number one, but also, as you know, and probably reading from that article and just learning about it now in general, you can change a child's life
Yeah.
just by being the non-paid volunteer
Right.
who's paying attention, who's the hub of information.
Yeah.
Very often, the CASA is the only one who's talking to the attorneys, the social workers, the judges, but most importantly, the kids,
Right.
and finding out what that kid needs and wants,
Yeah.
and trying to get it for that kid.
Yeah. Like I said, it was funny. The article came up and we just kind of looked at each other and went, okay,
Okay.
we need to talk about this.
Yeah, it looks like it
Looks like you smacked me upside the head with it one more, the universe stepped in and said, hey, pay attention.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my guests, her name is Megan Elizabeth Ward. She is a foster parent. She and her wife are foster parents in Athens, and they have fostered over 40 kids.
Oh, wow.
And she's actually starting a program, and I'll connect you with her because she's starting essentially like an information resource for people that are considering fostering kids or to foster kids, or also for CASAs. So, because what happens when you learn, and this would happen, you'll discover this if you end up being CASA, the training's fantastic and the support system is really, really good too. So there's always
Mhm.
people to reach out to. But like anything else, there's a learning curve. So as you're figuring out, okay, who's that? What does that mean? What do I need to do here? Who do I call? How many times should I call? Do I become that squeaky wheel? Yes, you
Right.
do, right? So, and you seem like the kind of person that would have the right personality for it in terms of the drive. And that's a really important part of it, that you just need to keep on going because you're going to change that kid's life.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, at least do the orientation or the training. It's really the kind of work that if it's right for you, you find that out. And
Right.
if it's not, you find that out pretty quickly too.
Right.
You know? So I want to ask you one other thing that I ask all my guests, and if you can dig deep for this. What is the one thing that no one would ever know about you unless you told them?
I gave 2 twins up for adoption when I was 19.
Oh my goodness, really?
Mhm.
Wow. Wow.
That's about as deep as I can go.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had twins.
Mhm.
Wow.
I did. It was the best thing I ever did in my life.
And those kids hopefully have a happy and full life now. Do you have any idea?
It was an open adoption. I stayed in contact till they were 5, and then I bowed out. I watched for a while, and then I was like, okay, time to go be a family.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I found the family myself. I took a long time to get to know them. I think I did good by picking a good family, and the 2 really great people. My understanding is the last time I had correspondence with the parents was they had adopted other children as well as finally also had one of their own as well. So
What an admirable thing for you to do. To
uh,
right, to put your kids in a good home.
yeah,
Wow.
I think I did.
I bet you did because as you said, you found the family, you vetted them, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And because when I don't know if you know anything about that, but when you're, at least back then, I don't know how much has changed, but nobody would talk to me because when I found out I was pregnant, I'd made the decision. And they're like, well, you haven't been pregnant long enough to know if that's really what you want to do. And it was like, well, no, I've made my decision. This is what I want to do. And nobody knew they were twins either. So it was I got lucky. My roommate at the time, it was in the wrong college class and inadvertently was talking to the person next to her about her roommate who was pregnant and was struggling to find somebody who'll even talk to her. And she's like, well, my mom knows somebody who knows somebody. And it evolved and they got to go through the entire pregnancy with me. And I got to get to know them for 7, 8 months before they were born. So
That's so brave, Maria. I mean, wow.
I wasn't about to try and take care of a kid. I mean, I didn't even know how to take care of myself at the time. And it was like, well, just because my adoption sucked doesn't mean every adoption sucks.
No, and it means that you gave those kids a chance to have the good adoption that you did not have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely. Lovely.
Yeah. So that's something that nobody knows about me for the most part, unless they ask. It's nothing that I hide, but you wouldn't think it looking at me.
Well, thank you very much for talking with me today. I think you're a wonderful woman.
Oh, thank you. I try. Some days are better than others.
But I also see the amount of care and time you've spent becoming yourself.
Yeah. It took a minute. I had to stumble a few times, but I figured it out.
Yeah. 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 I think you did. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for taking the time to speak with Jayne. And it's really great that you put the pieces back together again. And we're equally excited about the fact that working on this interview has inspired you to look into becoming a CASA. We believe you'll have an enormous amount to offer, so thank you. And next week, Jayne speaks with Allison Lieberman, a marriage and family therapist who worked in emergency shelters and residential facilities with foster youth, and now treats moms adjusting to motherhood. See you next week, and be well. If you see something, say something. If you suspect a child's health or safety is jeopardized in any way by parents or anyone else, contact the Child Protective Services Agency in your county. 24-hour hotlines are staffed by trained social workers who will help you through the process, and you can do so anonymously. In California, you can call the Child Protection Hotline at 800-540-4000. So if you see something, say something. You might be saving a child's life. If you want to know more about becoming a CASA anywhere in the country, go to nationalcasagal.org, and in LA, casala.org. And if you want to know more about becoming a foster parent, check out the National Foster Parent Association at nfponline.org. There's also faithfosterfamilies.org and adoptuskids.org. There's tons of other information online as well, so you can just hunt around. We also want to thank the supremely talented Christina Apostolopoulos for her beautiful original music. You can find her music on Spotify or Instagram at Christina Aposto. And also thank you to Yukon Har for his engineering. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear and you find it as valuable as we do, please rate us and hit subscribe. You can also make a donation at bonusbabies.org. See you next time.